In this video, I'm going to go over the different aspects of my experience in choosing the right plywood or lumber to make my cabinets. Uh, when I go to a box store like Home Depot or Lowe's, there's usually a lumber section, which is sort of a broad umbrella term to cover all kinds of wood products. But technically or professionally speaking, or in a specialized store, if we talk to specialists, lumber usually means hardwood. That means this kind of solid hardwood. Let's say this maple board that I have, or this kind of poplar board that I have, or this kind of regular pine board that I have. Under lumber, usually is also engineered lumber, like this kind of particle board with little wood chips glued together, and then this kind of MDF, which is sawdust basically glued together, and it's man-made. So it's called engineered wood. These are definitely different than plywood. Plywood is a whole, different criteria where you have wood that is made with, of course, plies of wood. That's why they name plywood from top to bottom. Um, and that's what we're going to be using. We'll be discussing the different kinds of plywood later on, but plywood is the choice of material to make cabinets and cabinet carcass, because it's not feasible, very expensive, possibly not even available to use solid wood like this for, let's say, 24-inch cabinet. It's very expensive even if it is available, and solid wood is susceptible to seasonal changes, expansions, contractions, whereas plywood is not. It has very less effect from seasonal changes. So it's solid. It should be, if it's a good quality, it shouldn't. It should be sturdy and unaffected by seasonal changes. I'm going to go over the makeup and construction of the plywood for a few moments, because this understanding and knowledge dictates and spills into how I cut the plywood and which side I use, and even the choice of plywood itself. So, like I said before, plywood is made up of plies of wood from the top all the way to the end. And the top and the end have a technical term. One side is called the face, and the other side is called the back. And in the middle, there is the core. The face is the main side of the plywood, the advertised and polished side of the plywood, usually. And the core, it could be anything. It could be layers of well defined wood, or it could be interspaced with MDF material. Sometimes there is no plies like this. Sometimes it's just the top and the face and the back, and in the middle, there is just a straight, solid lumber wood all the way from top to bottom, and it's sandwiched between two plies, and that's called lumber core wood. I don't have an example for that, but it's not mainstream, but I've seen a few. Now that I've gone through the differences between plywood and lumber and also the makeup of the plywood, I'm going to go through three main criteria, so three considerations in order to choose the right plywood. The first one is the quality. The When I see a plywood, sometimes I can see cracks like this and very ugly sort of rough surface, and I can easily make out that this is not really a good plywood to build cabinets out of. As I go through the line down, it gets better and better. And at some point, I don't know, the differences are unseen. Basically, it's not visible to the naked eye as much. For example, this is a nice oak um, plywood piece, and I can see a red oak veneer on the top and on the bottom, and nice core material, well defined core material on the and in between. But this is still not the best quality, believe it or not. So in order to understand the quality, you have to understand the standards. So the American standards, the ANSI standards, have come up with these naming conventions, which are usually stamped on every plywood or is in the product description. You have the face side of the plywood, and it has A, B, C, D ratings, A being the best. And then on the back side of the plywood, you have 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1 being the best, of course. So when I buy a plywood, in the product description is usually written what is the manufacturer is supposed to be writing what quality plywood this is. So it usually says A1 or B1 or B2, which indicates to me that the quality of the plywood. So A1 being obviously the best quality that I could have. Sometimes I think this may have to do with foreign imports, but you may not see a letter and a number, but like A1, but you might see two letters, like AA or AB for that matter. And that typically is still the same thing, because it's saying one side is A and one side is B. The one I got for making my outdoor cabinet is an AB, and I'll show that later. But that's about the face and the back of the plywood. But what about the core? There are some considerations here. The core may be having some materials in it like MDF that might not be as good for moisture oriented environment like outdoors or near a kitchen sink. So if there's too much MDF, it shouldn't be that, I can't use it in certain places. The number of plies, sometimes have very well, nicely defined multiple number of plies. Like over here, I can see it's a half-inch material, but I can still count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plies. Unlike this one, which has, just few bigger plies. And the last thing would be the thickness of the face itself. Sometimes some plywood may look good, but like in this example, the oak veneer on the top is really thin on the top and on the bottom, and it makes it very difficult. If I want to sand it, I might hit the bottom really fast. Instead, I would look for something a little bit more thicker face, like here and here on the bottom, that gives me an opportunity or depth to sand if needed. Now, moving on to the second point. The second consideration is the hardness. And there is something called as Janka ratings. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but Janka. I'll put a link to this on the description. But the Janka rating will dictate how hard the plywood is, and in this case, even lumber for that matter. And when we talk about ratings, I'm specifically talking the face of the face and the back of the plywood itself. What is it made of? Is it maple, birch, or oak? The core doesn't matter in this case. And in case of lumber, it's obviously the whole lumber. So when I'm looking at these ratings, they have several woods in it, but most of the wood is not even available in America. It could be available in specialty stores, but really the mainstream wood that is used or available commercially is maple, oak, birch, and pine, maybe poplar and Douglas fir, and so on. So in my case, I'm going to be choosing the hardest of wood, because in kitchen cabinet you don't want to make things out of poplar, because you can see it's not really that hard. But if I go up the line as a pine, and if I go up to birch and oak and maple, then these are usually the range that I would like to keep in. Whether I do plywood or whether I do lumber, I would rather keep myself to maple, oak, and birch for hardness. The one I got for making the outdoor cabinets, it's a special plywood called marine grade plywood, and that's simply means that the glue used in between to make these plies is waterproof, so it's suitable for making outdoor kitchen. For that, I could not find a marine grade plywood using maple, oak, or birch. The only thing I could find is Douglas fir. So I got a Douglas fir AB plywood, marine grade plywood, in order to make the external cabinets. The only place where I would use lumber, that is, hardwood, would be the rail and stiles of the door and the drawer fronts. So if I'm going to use, say, oak for the cabinet, then I'm going to buy oak lumber to make the rail and stiles and the drawer fronts. If I use maple or birch, then I'm going to use maple or birch for the rail and stiles and the drawer fronts. Now, I will move on to the third consideration, and that would be the finishing ability, meaning what am I going to finish the project with? Am I going to stain it, or am I going to paint it? Now, based on the wood choice, it will depend, because certain woods like oak, for example, red oak and white oak, it's not paint friendly because it has quite a bit of deep grain holes in it and doesn't catch paint that good. But it's very stain friendly. It looks really good in stain. So if cabinets are made out of oak, then I would probably stain it. But other materials like birch and maple, they're paint friendly. So if I'm planning to paint, I would probably use either birch or maple. So that's it. Those are the three criteria. Number one, the quality. Number two, the hardness. And number three, the finishing ability of that material. Thanks for watching.